Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie. I'm the Executive Director for Go Public Schools West Contra Costa. We're one of the 3 regions of Go's amazing work across the state of California. I am very excited to host you all this evening and have you here for a conversation around making college more affordable. I come to this work in many ways as a teacher and a principal, but in this specific moment, I come to it as a mom who has 2 kids in college. I fall into that very beautiful donut hole that Manny's going to talk to us about, of making just enough to not be fully eligible, but not enough living in the Bay Area to have extra money month to month. And so my children and I had to have a lot of conversations around how to make college affordable for them. And so we're excited to spend time this evening looking to answer the questions that all of you have and learn more together about how do we in fact make college a reality for our children. I also, as a young person, benefited from financial aid actually paying for the majority of my college. And so, although I believe deeply in the power of financial aid and opening doors for young people as they figure out how to go to college and beyond, as a first in family completer of college, my sister and I feel very lucky to have had the opportunity. And now I hope we help all of your children have that opportunity too. I want to thank our amazing panelists for being here this evening. I know giving us another extra hour and a half of your day is a lot to ask. And so thank you for both being here, but even more broadly, your passionate commitment to young people and the work you do every day. Thank you to Sarah Sandu on this call, who was an original author of one of our key guides that really helps parents think about college financial aid in a more robust way, both the practical part of how to do it, but also the emotional part of how to talk about it, of which both we're going to lean into this evening. Thank you to our whole broader organization and Darcel Sanders, our CEO, who is a champion of this work and really visioned it being org-wide. And therefore, we're excited tonight to have participants from our Fresno region, our Oakland region, West Contra Costa, and the broader state of California. So thank you all for being here and part of this journey with us. I'm going to hand it over to Brielle and let her take the reins.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. Now, I'd like to welcome our panelists that we have tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and share your knowledge about financial aid. Just a little bit about me. Again, my name is Brielle Pomerantz. I am the manager of community leadership at Go Public Schools West Contra Costa. And I have about 10 years of experience in education under my belt, many years in early childhood education, but also time in the ed tech world, as well as adult education and teacher coaching and mentoring. So that's sort of my background, and I'm so glad to be here with Go. I'll be facilitating today's conversation. In 30 seconds or less, panelists, can you tell us your name, where you work, and your role at your organization? And I'm going to start with Manny.
Good evening, everybody. Manny Rodriguez. I am the Director of Policy and Advocacy for TICAS, the Institute for College Access and Success. And I try to essentially make laws that are better for affordability, access, and accountability in higher ed.
Great. Thank you, Manny. And we'll go to Sarah.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Brielle. I come here today professionally. I have been in and around the world of college affordability and finance for several years, having led Go's college affordability work for about 3 years prior to transitioning roles. But today I am here as a parent. I'm a West Contra Costa Unified alumna myself, but I am also a parent to 2 beautiful children in college. So I have a lot to share with folks out there about how to make it more affordable. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. And Parshan.
Good evening, everybody. Parshan, California Policy Director for U Aspire. So my field is very similar to Manny's. We actually work quite closely on a lot of efforts in legislative and budget front, but also I similarly work on implementation quite a lot. And so a lot of the laws that Manny does help pass and make it happen, then we work with them to try to implement at the institutional level in colleges and universities. Happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Parshan, and thank you, Sarah and Manny, for all being here tonight. To start us off, I'm going to turn it over to Manny to share a presentation on some of the common misconceptions and myths about costs of college, so in-state versus out-of-state, community versus four-year, etc., and the different forms of financial aid a student could receive and how they are unique and different. So take it away, Manny.
Thank you very much, Brielle. And again, good evening, everybody. Very excited to be here once again with Go Public Schools. Love being a panel for y'all and being a resource. Before I get started, I also always like to kind of just give a full self-introduction of myself and kind of what brings me to this work, right? And my name is Manny Rodriguez, originally from San Diego, now live in Sacramento. I am the son of immigrants that came here from San Luis Potosí, Mexico. I am the first in my family to go to college, a financial aid beneficiary, first in my family to get a advanced degree, and now work in policy advocacy to help communities, students, parents that really looked like mine or me, right? And that's really a huge kind of full circle moment for me. My family still always thinks that I work for the government, and it's hard to distinguish that in like sometimes, but you know, one of my biggest things is how do we make our government serve you all in a much more equitable, better way, and really help get more of us to and through college. That's really one of my main goals. What that brings me to work here. So to start us off, right, I wanted to talk about this myth, this conception that I think all of us have heard. I know for myself, I was very close to, deferring going to a 4-year UC CSU because I could have gone to Palomar College, done a few years, transferred out, and it was going to be a lot more affordable. But when we start digging into that cost of college and the supports students get at our different institutions, we see, as you see on the charts here, the tuition and fees is still a factor. That is still something students and parents must take into consideration at all segments. As you'll see, the UC 35%, the CSU 20%, community college 5%. But I want you to focus on the larger part of the donut, the green part, and that is the non-tuition costs. So this is, housing, this is food, this is transportation to and from campus, this is your books, your supplies, all the other pieces that don't just go into tuition and fees. And when we look at thinking about the total cost of college, that is nowadays the biggest driver of costs that we must pay attention to and really consider as our students and as you as families consider what are our options for your students. Next slide, please. So you'll see here, I wanted to dig a little deeper on like, what does this mean, right? So one of the areas y'all working in public schools, West Contra Costa, highlighting a few kind of colleges, universities in your area, right? We have UC Berkeley, CSU East Bay, Berkeley City College. And again, thinking about the donut, so here, the blue part is still the blue part. We see that tuition and fees, that is a big factor at UC, CSU, slightly smaller at Berkeley City. But when we look at those other costs, those non-tuition costs, we see that it's pretty much the same for all colleges, around 18,000, 19, almost close to 20,000 in the East Bay, right? And this is very important to remember because oftentimes, depending on the type of university, college a student goes to, they'll be eligible for different types of aid. And I'll talk about that aid a little bit more in the future, but that aid could be federal, it could be state. And one of the biggest one, institutional. This is dollars coming from the institutions, from the university. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So when we look at, we then take into consideration all that aid that I just mentioned, right? The federal, the state, institutional. We see that this is how much those grants can cover of that total cost. So at the UC, even though it's close to 34, 35, they're covering about 26,000, right? And you still have a net college cost or remaining cost of about 8,000 or 9,000. And you work your way down, you look at the CSU again, right? How much are they covering? It's almost 50-50, just slightly over. Then when you move down to the community college, again, the perception of these are the most affordable. Yes, $46 per unit is the cheapest I think you'll find anywhere. The community college serves 100% of our students, and they do a good job serving them. But one of the biggest factors, again, is the type of aid available to students and the type of aid they can get to pay for those non-tuition costs that we must take into consideration. And we see here, based on the aid you can get, they still have the largest kind of out-of-pocket non-financial aid covered cost. Next slide, please. So what does this look like statewide, right? We saw a little glimpse into the Bay Area and into Berkeley City College, UC Berkeley, CSU, East Bay. And when we looked at our research at TICAS, we did this research a few years ago. In 9 regions throughout the whole state, from Northern California, Central, Southern California, 7 out of the 9 community colleges, again, have the largest price tag, the largest total cost of attendance and unmet need that we need to cover. I'm not saying, you know, the UC and CSU are fine, right? We still have affordability issues. We have to get there. We can still make improvements there, right? You'll look at the numbers across the state here, 8,000, 9,000, that's still a lot. But we also have to remember this is an investment in your child's future, in your family's future. And this is all gonna be worth it in the end, but we have to have these conversations early. We have to prepare for this and understand the difference between like the sticker price and the total cost and unmet need. And we really have to make sure we understand kind of what all these pieces mean and what they will mean as we factor our future. Next slide, please. So what are the different types of financial aid available to us? There's a lot. Again, the main 3 buckets you'll see here are, there is institutional aid. So again, this is aid that is provided by the university, by the segment. We have state aid. Oftentimes we're talking about the Cal Grant here. We're talking about middle class scholarship as well. We also have federal aid. Federal aid, most of the time when we talk about this, it is Pell Grant, but there are other options. There is work study, where you can get a job on campus. I myself worked at the kitchen my first semester, became a tour guide. Work study, great experience, right? And it helps develop some of those professional skills that pair nicely with the academic work you'll do, and you get financial aid. You get paid to fund your college. There's also federal loans, federal student-backed loans. And this is something, right, we want to not really like bank on that being the thing we use, but just know there is that option. It is part of the equation, and it is the safest way to borrow if you're really looking into investing long-term, because there are things such as income-driven repayment plans, which help waive some of these or cancel some of the debt after a certain amount of years of paying off, right? Puts you on payment plans that are reasonable. And there's some new changes that are being proposed that can make that even more equitable and better in the long run. But when you see here, right, you see that the CSU system, UC system have an institutional aid called SUG, State University Grant at the CSU system, Blue and Gold at the UC system. This institutional aid is critical, particularly for low income, middle income students, because this really helps meet that kind of unmet need after any type of aid, because they really want to make sure that their institutions, their universities, their schools are accessible and affordable to you. So these are all pieces of the affordability pie that we have to keep in mind. So one of the ones that I particularly wanted to mention and kind of uplift to you all, right, is this donut hole that we talked about in for families, right, where you're not low income enough that you can get Pell Grant, Cal Grant, all other funding help, but you're on the higher end where you can't pay for everything out of pocket, right? The good news here in California, we have something called the Middle Class Scholarship. Now, the way to get the Middle Class Scholarship, it is still the same way you would try to access any of the other kind of programs that you may not be eligible for because of income, right? So you do have to fill out a FAFSA or a California DREAM Act for students. You still have to go through that process, which is going to be simplified in the next coming years, but it is still a process we all have to go through, and that really helps dictate kind of where you will land amongst this kind of spectrum of different types of aid available to you. So for middle class scholarship, this is available for students attending the CSU or the UC with income assets up to $201,000 annually. There are certain eligibility requirements, such as being a California resident, US citizen, or permanent resident. You can also have the AB 540 exemption, which allows undocumented students, immigrant students on certain like visas to also access this aid. You have to meet the income assets, you have to maintain a certain GPA and maintain that satisfactory academic progress. You can't be in default of any loans already and can't be incarcerated. This aid is available to you for 4 years while you're attending these institutions. And the way they really kind of calculate that is, right, what is your cost of attendance? You're going to a school, it costs let's say hypothetical, $35,000. What are the available resources at your disposal? So this means like expected family contribution, expected self-help amount, and then other grants, scholarships, other funds that are helping you pay for that. So they take kind of this formula and they figure out, all right, this is how much we can help you with. Again, likely won't cover everything, but it is a good kind of significant help that you can really tap into when you're in this middle kind of donut hole that we mentioned on the front end. Next slide. Thank you. And again, one of the final pieces that I wanted to mention, and I've said it a few times already, right, is college is a long-term investment, right? These are conversations you start having with your students, with your kids now about, you know, where are they thinking about attending? Oftentimes factors like, do you live on campus versus off campus? Do you live with your family or do you live independently, can impact your cost of attendance calculations and how much aid you can get, right? There's also, and Parshawn will go into this, a lot of different assistant programs or different types of resources, basic needs that are available to your student where they can help kind of meet some of those issues, right? And the bottom line that I always tell parents is cost shouldn't be the thing that kind of takes college off the board, because there's plenty options for you. Just make sure you get in contact with the right experts, the right organizations in your local area to help you understand some of these and what you may qualify for.
Great. Thank you so much, Manny, for all that amazing information. I'm going to turn to Sarah now. As a parent, what are some ways you have stretched dollars as your children have navigated college?
I have to just recover from taking so many notes from Manny's presentation here. That was such great information. I want to actually start by saying that both of our kids are attending college out of state. Our eldest is in Washington and our middle guy is in Oregon. So I'll get to our reaction as a family when they decided to go there a little bit later. But both kids qualified for Washington and Oregon's version of a middle class scholarship. And I want to say that our daughter in Washington receives about $3,000 a year in support from that scholarship, while our son in Oregon State receives about $15,000 a year. So very different, but very helpful when it comes to us being able to afford tuition and all the costs associated with college. Some of the things that, obviously with them being out of state, they have to live on campus. They lived on campus, both of them, their first year. When it came time to select housing, we did notice that if you selected a triple for the dorm versus a double or a single, the price was significantly lower for the housing costs. And we also noticed that if you were picking a building that was thought of as being like an older building versus a newer building, there was also a reduction in costs there. And so both kids picked triples in somewhat older buildings. And I don't mean like they're decaying or falling down. They're in great shape. They're just not brand new with like, you know, all the logos and things all over the place. Both beautiful places to live, and that really did help. The other thing I will say, we did learn when it came time to select their meal plans, if you pick a meal plan, I don't know if this is the case at all colleges, but it's something to think about when your kids decide where they want to go. If you select the highest meal plan, you can't then mid-semester or mid-quarter decide that you want to switch to the lower tier meal plan that offers less. And so if your child doesn't use, you know, the points or the dollars allotted in their meal plan, those are just unspent dollars. You don't get refunds. And this may be different at varying schools, but in a lot of cases, that is money that you just have to eat in costs. So as you and your child are figuring out where they're going and what they're doing, I would look at doing lower tier meal plans that you can then add on to if they need more throughout the year. That was one thing my wife and I learned. Another thing is having kids out of state or even within California, because California is such a big state. If you know you want your child home for holidays or celebrations, book their travel early. Book it early, because doing last minute flights for Thanksgiving or for, you know, any winter holiday, that price really adds up. We have been, I'm not paid to say this by Southwest, but I'm gonna shout out Southwest for being really flexible with allowing us to change flights last minute if there's a final or something that comes up. But work with your child to get their schedule down early and decide, you know, are you coming home for this break? Are you coming home for this holiday? Because those last minute flight reservations really do add up. And then I think the last thing I want to say, and I know that there are efforts throughout not just California, but throughout the country to really tackle this. Textbooks do cost students a ton of money. And I know various colleges are looking at ways to equitably figure out how to take that burden off of students. Both of our kids have managed to rent textbooks off of Amazon or have purchased kind of the older versions of textbooks that have been completely okay for their classes, and that has saved us a lot of money. And so just some things to consider once your child is landed on their school of choice.
Thank you, Sarah. Along with some of those tips that you've mentioned, in goes Parents' Guide to College Conversations, which I know you helped author. We have an outline of some of those things that she mentioned, some other things for cost saving student health insurance. If college students are often unknowingly billed for health insurance through the university, so if your child is still covered under your own health insurance plan, be sure to opt out of the college's plan. And then another thing she didn't mention is commuting and transportation. So if your child is commuting, scheduling classes over a few days a week versus the whole week to help reduce transportation costs, gas, parking, vehicle wear and tear, etc., you can encourage your child to take public transportation, especially if it's free or discounted for local college students. So those are some other ways to reduce costs. Now I want to turn to Parshan because he had some other cost saving ideas and tips and tricks for saving some money. So go ahead. Thank you, Parshan.
Thank you, Brielle. Appreciate you. And just like Manny, I want to also echo that a lot of what we all are here to do is rooted in our own stories. So I want to also kind of sharing a little bit about my story, right? Similar to Manny, I'm a first generation immigrant, but I came in here as a refugee and without knowing a single word of English, right? So there's also for a lot of my family, a lot of the struggles that I went through, on top of figuring out college as a first generation student, it's also figuring out all these other elements of being a first generation immigrant, having to learn English, having to process a lot of stuff. I lost my financial aid halfway through college because of back in the day we had this GPA verifications, and this is thankfully not no longer an issue that anybody has to worry about. But there are loopholes that exist in our financial aid system. There have been quite a lot of strides that have been made in recent years to close those loopholes and get us to where we need to be. I remember exactly when that report that Manny was mentioning got released by TICAS that talked about how community colleges can often be even more expensive than the CSU and the UC counterparts, and that completely shifted the narrative of how we talk about financing higher education for students. And there's efforts that have been happening as recent as last year around expanding Cal Grant and the Middle Class Scholarship Act to make sure that more and more students can qualify for financial aid, and we're still working towards it. But in the meantime, there are issues that exist, and there are realities that we should also be talking about, right? In the CSU system and community college system specifically, but also at the UC system, we have issues with basic needs insecurity. At the community colleges, 1 in 5 students are facing homelessness and housing insecurity. That's 1 in 10 in the CSU, and 1 in 20 in the UC for references. About half of college students indicate facing some sort of food insecurity. So regardless of, and these are folks who, again, these stats and data are regardless of income level. Often it's because of various different factors that exist, and we work with a lot of. I've worked in the past quite a bit with basic needs centers, and we often try to elevate that there are a lot of resources available for families and for students to utilize in the basic needs world. And this is an area that the legislature has invested quite heavily in recent years. So whether or not your student is going to a community college system, a CSU system, or a UC system, or even I might add, if they're going out of state to some other school and university, chances are, and now and increasingly so, they have some kind of a basic needs center. So one of the first things I would say that your kids need to be connecting with the moment they know which university or college it is that they want to go to is finding out what are those basic needs resource centers, and seeking them out, finding out what the resources are that they have. So I've gone ahead just kind of to show, and I hope I have sharing access if possible. I want to go ahead and share with folks some of what's out there at the UC and CSU. As an example, the community colleges is working on a central website right now that should be out as well. But just at the UC and CSU, there is quite a lot that is out there. So the UC system, for example, has a whole website that's on the basic needs front. It's and I'll share a link to all of these sublinks later, but you can see all kinds of services. So whether or not folks are dealing with food insecurity, there are food pantries in every one of our UC, CSU, and community colleges that offer free food products, and it's literally free. Students just have to sign up and show up, and it's not even anymore just food products. It includes all kinds of other products as well. Sometimes fresh groceries products, sometimes access to other sorts of cleaning supplies and other things that are helpful. And on top of that, there's also the CalFresh, which I want to really emphasize your students. The moment they turn 22, they should be applying for CalFresh. And if you do qualify for CalFresh now, your family does, it's worth looking it over and looking at the applications to see if it makes sense for your child to also separately apply for CalFresh. Each of these campuses and universities, for the most part, have CalFresh hubs that provide support for students to fill out the CalFresh. And the CalFresh, for folks who don't know, is basically the food stamp in California. And it is something we highly folks to fill out because you can get up to $234 a month to support your groceries. That's a lot on a college student's budget. That could go a long way to help them out with their needs. We know there are housing needs as well, and I'll now go into the CSU to show you that there's a very similar thing as well at the CSU, and you can actually locate which CSU or UC your child is going to, find out exactly what their programs are, what their contact information are, and get in touch with them. So those are the kinds of things that I would say we really want to be cautious of and take down and hone down as soon as we get there. Now, more so about what my organization U Aspire does. So we have advisors that work with high school graduating seniors as well as college students on two different tracks of advising. So for the past 37 years, the organization has been doing this work on a regular basis with direct advising to support students with really answering the key question that I think everybody is here has been trying to point out to is, how do we finance college? How do we make sure that we're getting the bang for our buck for the investment that is going to retain a college degree? And how do we make sure that in the choice that we make of our college, that for our child, that choice is the best choice financially, that makes the most sense in terms of the return to your investment, right? And so
Yeah.
go ahead, Brielle, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, absolutely. And I think we're gonna segue into what are some of those conversations. So once a student has been gotten into colleges, they've gotten their acceptance letters and financial aid award letters, they've filled up the FAFSA and the CATA, and they've gotten those, there needs to have some honest conversations need to happen with the child and the parents, right? Or the family, the guardian, to make those decisions. So we know these can be uncomfortable conversations sometimes for children and parents alike. What are some, and this is to all the panel, what are some trade-offs or negotiables or non-negotiables that might need to be considered and discussed?
Brielle, I'm happy to, I want to share both my own experience as a student and then later on as a parent. So my father's family's from India, and my grandparents brought my dad and his siblings here in pursuit of a better education. And when my dad became a father, it was really important to him and to my mom that I sought out education, right, in higher education in some way. And I think even if you were to ask him now to this day, he would say that it was his responsibility and my mom's responsibility to help me pay for college. And I appreciate that so much. And I understand where that comes from. I also wish at the time he would have had an honest conversation. Him and my mom would have had an honest conversation with me about their budget and what they could actually afford. We ended up taking out loans and I worked and it all worked out in the end. But I know that they hid stuff from me as far as, and it was because they didn't want me to worry. And I respect that so much. And I know where that comes from. And as a parent now, I think my wife and I both feel that, we want to do whatever we can for our kids to get, be on the path that they want to be on and support them on it. And budgets are real. Budgets are real things that we have to have honest conversations about. And I would just encourage parents out there who are listening. I know talking about money is really uncomfortable, but I have heard from both students and from families that it is one of those things that keeps you up at night around, like, how am I going to afford this? Like, what am I going to do? And I encourage openness, and students want openness from their parents around what the budget constraints are. And I'm not saying, both Prashant and Manny have mentioned several ways to help finance this college journey, but I think it starts with being really honest about what your constraints are. Because I will say that it is really hard to tell your kid, no, you can't go to that school once they visit and fall in love with it if you can't afford it. And so I think having my non-negotiable is honesty. Be honest with where your family is and what is possible, and then go from there and do this together as a family. Neither party should feel like they're isolated in this process. And so I think that's just really important. And I would start there before you have any conversations. Lead with honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. In those conversations that can maybe be heated or difficult, do you have any thoughts on ways parents can set themselves up for success in those conversations? We talked about honesty. Manny or Prashant, do you have any thoughts on that? Ways to help parents set them up for success in those conversations?
I mean, I think Sarah hit the nail on the head, right? I think leading with honesty is the great one. I think for parents, too, is start early on and figure out kind of like have some conversation around financial literacy. I think that's also a big skill that sometimes even us as adults might not fully grapple with, right? So like trying to pass on some of those skills early on with your kids. And also, again, I think back to the piece that Prashant was elevating is make sure y'all are informed and really seeking out as much information to inform those decisions and have these conversations, right? And just be honest on all those and be open to the help you can receive. I know sometimes it's hard to accept help or say I need help, but it's okay to kind of have that time and that space to accept that.
Yeah, I would just say research. I think that often, especially folks who are first generation, we have these dreams and aspirations and these big name schools that we want to send our kids to, and because that makes our family proud, and it's important for our success story, for those stories to be told. But if we are gonna send your school into the big name, your kids into the big name school that provides them with zero financial aid, with zero pathways to a career afterwards, with a degree that's probably not gonna help them out in any way, that's not gonna be setting up for success. It's about where we end, not where we start, that matters. And so, really just doing that well research and continuing to be informed, as Manny and Sarah and everyone has been sharing. I'll just, to that note, I will put this link out for everyone. Some of the resources that I was sharing earlier and some other resources are out there that folks can utilize. I want to specifically point out to one thing. Our folks at USpire, we do provide direct technical advising as well. And there is a couple of slot opportunities that are out there. If anybody wants to take advantage of those, here is the link for for folks to click on that, as well as we do some workshops around FAFSA and CADA, because that's where it all starts. And I'll just say that the researching and being well informed, it starts with filling out FAFSA and CADA. I'd be remiss if I did not elevate that. So
Right.
yeah.
Thank you, Prashant. Those are great. Thanks so much. I also want to say, in again goes A Parent's Guide to College Conversations. We do have outlined some things to consider before having those conversations. So that is a resource for you. We're going to drop that in the chat before the end of this evening, as well as some sentence stems that will also help guide that open and productive conversation to get started. So if it gets a little sticky, saying this feels hard for me, or I really hear what you're saying, or this is a concern I have. And so ways for parents and children to have that dialogue. Let's see. I think we're at the point where I'm going to invite questions from the audience. So as you do that, please type your questions in the Q&A section, and it's going to be read by me. As you try to do that, we've already sort of cultivated some questions from you registering. So I have some of those ready to go. If your question is not answered, we'll try to do a follow-up, but we will try to answer as many questions as possible. All right, so we had a lot of questions come in about a 529. So like, how does a 529 come into play? Are 529 accounts a good idea for middle-class families? And how does that factor into when you fill in your FAFSA application or other assets?
Hey, Brielle, thank you. That's a really good question. I will say our two eldest in college had 529s. I think that a thing to really think about as you're opening them, especially for those listening who have younger children, your contributions do matter. And so I think that while in the case of our two kids, one 529 helped cover the cost of 1 year of college for one child. It helped cover the cost of about 2.5 to 3 for our other child. And so your contribution limit or your contribution abilities do come into play. I think sometimes they are a good idea overall as a parent, but I also think that sometimes they are marketed as by the time your kid reaches college, it will all be paid for with this account. I know there are also just technical questions on reporting it as an asset for the FAFSA. I did I researched some blogs around this, and Manny and Prashant, if I'm wrong, please jump in. But my research showed that, so for 529s in particular, you do report them as an asset if you are the account owner, but not the beneficiary. So I know that was a question. And I do believe that non-custodial parents can open 529s. And then if that is the case, they're not reported. So if a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle opens one, the parent of the FAFSA or the CADA filer then does not claim it as an asset. Is that correct? To y'all's, I see some head nodding. So I'm
to my knowledge,
okay.
yes. I think
Yeah.
you're
So I know
spot
that's
on.
a question. I'm oh no, assets I have to report. But yes, so that is my experience. But generally, I think saving where you can for your child's education is never a bad idea if you can do it. But I also recognize that it is really hard to do. We sometimes live check to check, and yeah, so I don't, no shame, no shade. And if you can, open one.
Great, thank you. Another question was, is there a way students can learn more about merit aid in addition to financial aid? And then does that play into the relevance of SATs or GPA into financial aid or scholarship opportunities?
Yeah, so I think for myself, at least, kind of looking back on my experience, when it comes to merit-based aid, scholarships, private scholarships, things like that, I would say check out ask your high school if they have a scholarship list or a kind of ours literally had a binder of local groups, clubs, Kiwanis clubs, the Elk Lodge, or different groups had local scholarships in the San Diego area. You can also contact, again, community colleges. These are community schools, community centers. They have financial aid offices. They probably have a list or options of different ones that are available to students. I know a lot of direct service organizations also have some sort of list. The one that comes to mind right now is there's a huge list put on by, I think it's called 10,000 Degrees, an organization up here in Northern California, Bay Area, if I remember correctly. that has like a whole list of different types of scholarships, private scholarship, merit-based scholarships, and all of those have their own eligibility, from GPA to essays to letters of recommendation. So making sure you just find those.
Great. I just wanted to quickly go back to 529s. We have a great slide that Natalie found that shows sort of over time, depending on how much you invest, how much it can grow for your student. So again, earlier is better. If your student is a senior, maybe it's not the best time to start it, but if you can start it earlier, you can see how it grows over time. Yeah, so that, if you just want to show that.
Yeah, and Brielle, one other thing is
Mhm.
this is an area the state is trying to like invest in, and so there are some matching programs as well that are out there. So it's always, I think, is a good idea to think about if it makes sense for your family, because there could be also other funding that get matched. So I know there was I'm gonna put this in the chat as well, but there was earlier back in a couple of years ago, the treasurer's office in California announced that they were going to add like a good amount to 250, I think it was, or 225.
Mhm. Great, thank you. We had a question come in about, so different, if your family status sort of changes. So someone had asked, if how can I address a divorce in process if in 2022, when 2020 taxes are applied situation, or there's like differing life events that are happening? Is there a way to best address that in filling out those FAFSA forms?
I hope I didn't freeze too badly, but yeah. So there is resources that are out there for those. So it is complicated. We do have support services that can help with that. So again, I would highly encourage folks, if you have questions, we have a website designed specifically for this. So anybody who if you have questions on what are these different elements of filling out financial aid and FAFSA and CADA, you can refer to this website and get a lot of those questions answered. There's videos on here that can explain them. There's also tools. We also have broader tools that are provided by the California Student Aid Commission that helps with families and parents, students to figure out what are some commonly answered questions that come up. And so again, there's plenty of resources that are out there. I'll pause there, but I know we ran
Yeah,
out.
thank you. No, of course.
Can I
We have a
add
lot of
one
questions
piece
about,
to that one?
oh yeah, go ahead, Manny.
The other one that I want to elevate, as y'all either applied or have already applied, it's the middle of the year, and whether it's a divorce or you lose a job or any income change, one thing that I always want to uplift, and I actually just helped one of my younger cousins with this, is there are appeals that you can do with your financial aid offices. Very, very important. Oftentimes, first generation students don't know about this, but there's appeals that you can go to your financial aid office and say, I had a change in my EFC, or I need you to exercise something called professional judgment and evaluate my case and see that my parent can no longer help. I lost this massive amount of income because of ABC, and they're able to then restructure your financial aid package in the middle of the year, oftentimes, or on the very front end. The one piece I will make sure to uplift is make sure you go as early as possible, find out if there are any like random arbitrary dates on when those appeals have to be filed. Schools have a lot of flexibility on those setting those dates. So some have them early on, some just have rolling dates. So appeals are very, very important. And whether it's, especially if it's in the middle of the year.
Great.
Can I add to that too? And Barshawn, maybe you know this because I know U Aspire does direct work with students. I think financial aid offices are paying even more attention to those kind of post-filing appeals, especially because of the pandemic, because things had changed so much for families, loss of employment, change in income, things like that. And so I I want to just double and triple down what Manny is saying. Don't be don't say no yourself. Let them tell you, like, at least try the appeal process before it, if anything, and do realize that I think financial aid offices are trying to pay more attention to changes in life given the pandemic. I think it woke a lot of people up.
Absolutely,
Great.
sir. There's a lot of resources, and I'll add there's not a single reason for anyone to not fill out the FAFSA KDA application in California. And there's a lot of basic needs emergency grants specifically for those kinds of issues that folks were mentioning that are out there as well that complement the financial aid side. So fill it out, folks. March 2nd, that's the priority deadline.
Right. And I'll say at the end, we're going to have one more webinar coming up that will help them get through. And then also, we have great resources with U Aspire and other organizations helping. Another question that came up a lot was about scholarships. We're going to share some resources at the end, but what is the best time for students to be applying to scholarships, which fall under financial aid, free money, right, to help pay for college, but can they apply for them earlier, starting in 9th or 10th grade?
Yes. Apply as early as possible. Find them early on. I remember getting some beginning in 10th grade, like even if it's like little $300, $150, don't think, oh, this is only a few hundred, that can help with food costs, that can help with transportation costs, that can help with a book in a whole semester, right? So yes, apply early, apply whenever you start getting a chance, and make sure you look at those lists of the different options that are available.
Great. Thank you. And then another piece, someone wanted to know, do you know of any scholarships for a student who plans to study internationally, or where they could find resources for that?
So if they are planning on studying internationally, there's like hoping two different types of it. So if they're a student that are planning on attending a UCU or a CSU and then study abroad, there's quite a bit of resources that are out there. The programs often kind of plan it out for them as they apply. But if they're planning on going to really like fully study abroad, that's there are a lot more limitations, because often the way financial aid pools are designed are to first and foremost go to the folks who live in the geographic region that they're from. So that's for the same reason why you will see a lot of the state schools in California will be a lot cheaper for folks who are from California than for folks who are coming from outside of California or internationally. So I would say this with a big caveat. I know some folks want to study abroad and have that abroad experience. I would highly recommend that they still go to a college or university in California and then try to do a study abroad for a semester.
Okay, great. All right. I'm going to wrap up our questions for now. I want to make sure we stay on time. So in research for this panel, so we're talking about scholarships. We came across some great resources available that we wish we knew were around. We were applying to college. So Natalie, if you can put up that slide for our resources. Maybe. I'll just continue to talk about them. But there's an app called Scholly, or a website, it's myscholly.com, that is, or other apps or databases like scholarships.com that allow for easier searches for, again, that free money, those scholarship application opportunities based on location, interests, academics, nationality, religion, gender, etc. Pretty much like runs the gamut, but ways for you to search for that. And then we have programs like the Hebrew Free Loan Program. We know like federal aid is really great, but there are also some great programs that partner with the Hebrew Free Loan Program, such as Rivet School, 10,000 Degrees, Northern California College Promise Coalition, to name a few. And they help provide interest-free loans to help young people from low and moderate income houses in Northern California pursue higher education. and you don't need to be Jewish, but you just need to be referred by one of their organizations that you can find online. All right, I just wanted to share this. We were talking about scholarships. I'm going to shift back over to questions. Thank you, Natalie. Let's see if there's any more great questions. Some people had some questions. Oh yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
No, I just wanted to, I was about to type this in the chat, but if there's time to say it, I just want to clarify, because I know there's sometimes confusion around it. So I have 2 kids going to college out of state. I just want to, it may be implied in the title, but I want to underscore Cal Grants are not eligible for students who go out of state. Cal Grants are specifically for California students. It's the largest state administered aid that is available. And so just want to emphasize that there. And there are, the California Student Aid Commission on its website has a really actually easy to understand table that talks about income and asset ceilings to see where you might, you know, where you can look at it and see where your family falls and see if you might qualify for a Cal Grant. But also, yeah, so just want to make that plug.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Quick add in. Hi, everyone. It's me again, Natalie. My kid goes to University of Washington. Out of state's pretty expensive, but traveling abroad is actually cheaper for a quarter than staying in state in the US. So when you travel abroad, like for the summer, lots of other universities have a universal fee. They get rid of the in-state, out-of-state differential. It can actually be cheaper to go abroad for a little bit. She had a whole quarter of units for a fraction of the price, and she was in Italy for the summer. So when you're thinking about ways in which your kid might accelerate to graduation, I think that's a great opportunity. And I want to make sure, I can't remember his name earlier, but because of units my kids had from AP courses and other things, both our kids entered with 30 units under their belt because their schools had a very liberal policy around taking in units from high school. So both entered almost as sophomores when they were brand new freshmen, which saved money for us around units once they got there. And so it's worth exploring because some of the UCs are very rigid on what units they'll take and what they'll give you, and other schools are quite liberal. And so that is a way to save a lot of money, is that they come in with UC credit or with AP tests from classes they took while they were in high school. But also don't be afraid of international travel, because it really did actually save money, which is a weird thing to think about. And she had the experience of traveling abroad, which I did not have when I was in college. So 2 things to consider.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. All this great information. Let's see if there's a couple more questions here. We had some questions about specific, is there a database to find scholarships for like historically Black colleges and universities? I know we have a lot of different nationalities represented and different races. Are there ways to find scholarships for that?
I mean, I know those scholarships are out there. Off the top of my head, I can't remember like the names, but I would say it's safe to say yes, there are scholarships for different race, ethnicity groups, for kind of any kind of factor you can think about, right? So what I would say again is do that research online. Again, no place, you shouldn't have to pay to apply for any scholarships. So always be on the lookout for kind of schemes or fraud here and there, right? But just be smart, right? This should be a trusted group, organization, entity, club. It shouldn't cost you money, because the whole point of scholarships is to give you money.
Yeah, great. Let's see if there's any questions in the Q&A here. I don't think there's any that we haven't really answered. Is there anything else our panelists would like to share that we feel like we haven't covered that really apply to these middle class families, those that sort of fall, you make too much money, you don't make enough money, it's sort of in that middle ground? Anything we haven't covered?
One piece that I will add, Natalie mentioned this on the AP front, right? Another piece, another program that you can get some of these credits up front to help reduce the time in school and kind of working on chipping away. There are dual enrollment programs throughout the state. The state is doing a good job investing in these programs, amplifying the capacity for these. So make sure you also talk to your high school to figure out how can you get into these dual enrollment programs. These are community college classes, college units while you are in high school that will count both towards your high school or should count towards high school and college. So again, you can go into college already as a, one semester in or even a whole year in, depending on how many classes you can fit on the back end. And those classes are free for students, right? You can take college courses while in high school and they're free for you. So definitely take advantage of those as well.
Great. Thank you, Manny. Anything from Sarah or Parshan?
Prashant, go for it. I'll go after you.
You'll close us out. That sounds good. I'll be very quick. Just want to elevate. I put a link on the White House's initiative on HBCUs that includes a very good tool on scholarships and internships for HBCUs. So for whoever is interested, feel free to use that. But the number one thing again, I have to say, it's been echoed by all my colleagues and everyone here, is to make sure that we really do all our research and utilize the information that's out there to really see what the total cost will be for attendance and the opportunities that will be there for our kids and children to succeed and make those decisions informed of what those costs are. There's a lot of hidden costs in going to college, a lot that we have been trying to tackle and we will continue to tackle, but that still exists and could really, boost up the prices from what you see on the brochure and the pamphlets to what really ends up being the cost when the student is going through it. So understanding those will really be key to successful experience for your children. And start with filling out FAFSA and CADA by March 2nd. Cannot emphasize that enough.
Thank you, Parshan.
I
And
know,
Sarah,
I'm like, please fill it out. I also want to say, Barshan's organization, You Aspire, has a college cost calculator. I don't know if it's the link is in the chat, if it's come through already, but it's really helpful. And I think you can compare your award packages and really get a sense of what the true cost of college is, which I think is really important. The other thing I will say, it has been echoed here, please fill out the FAFSA or the DREAM Act application. Don't be the one to cancel yourself out from potentially getting access to federal aid, state aid, or institutional aid. The other piece I will say, and I will find the link and drop this in the chat, but it is sometimes people mess up on these forms. My wife and I have kind of screwed up on one of the filling out the FAFSA for one kid, and we were able to do a correction, and that is okay. So I know it seems daunting as you're a parent going into it, especially if you're doing it for the first time. Mistakes happen, and you can do corrections and get it in there. And yeah, just don't tell yourself no. Don't tell yourself no. Let the government, let the state tell you no. But chances are you may be really surprised at the awards or the aid that you have access to that you may not have thought of before.
Thank you, Sarah. And a question came up in the chat that I just want to uplift. Someone was wondering, when do you complete out this FAFSA? You complete it in their senior year, and then every year they are in college. And the window is always the same from October 1st to March 2nd. So I just want to, those that are filling it out, I want to make sure we uplift that.
Is it, is it different for, if you're in community college, is it a different deadline? It's
It's
September?
Yeah.
Yep. There. Great.
There's a further deadline for community college students, and March 2nd is a priority deadline. So don't want to get into too much complications, but there are opportunities still after that deadline. But please make sure to fill out, because this financial aids are first come, first serve. So
yes,
really you want to fill that before the priority deadline.
Great. So a few more things before we end. Don't forget, you are not alone when you are completing your financial aid application. We have a parent's guide to financial aid that is always here to help you. Links are already in the chat for English and Spanish guidebooks. We also placed in the chat a parent's guide to college conversations, which we highlighted some pieces here, but you have access to that, again, free to download, English and Spanish. And then we want your feedback. So please take a few moments right now to complete the survey. It's in the chat, or we dropped in the chat, to capture your thoughts and reflections on tonight's conversation. So we'll just take a few minutes. Great. So as you're filling that out, we have one more financial aid webinar coming up Wednesday, February 15th from 6 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. same time to help families get to the finish line with their FAFSA and CADA applications. So if you have questions that were brought up today or weren't answered, again, we really want to encourage all our families to fill out one of those two forms. We have that webinar for you, again, Wednesday, February 15th from 6 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. to help get to that finish line, get those questions answered. We are going to wrap up with our raffle. So we have, again, those two gift cards, the $150 gift card, courtesy of the Ed Fund. It goes to Hilda Saldana from Oakland. So we'll be getting in touch with you and getting that to you. And then our second $50 gift card, courtesy of here at Go Public Schools, is Amarantha Silva from San Rafael. And I think that is all for this evening. So thank you all. And I hope you have a great evening.